Great. So hi, my name's Solomon, and I'm on the Cloud API team at Hasura, and I also, I guess I'm like the lead developer on Kriti, which is our JSON templating language that we've implemented for webhook transforms. And Kriti is kind of an interesting language because unlike most templating languages which operate on text, Kriti is really built around, it's an expression language that's built around JSON specifically. So any valid Kriti template will always evaluate into valid JSON, which is kind of like a nice property to have for our application. And it's I mean, you've all seen it, so you've seen some examples of it already, but I was just going to go over really quickly the basic syntax and then show a few of the newer things that we're working on. But it's it's meant to be very small. You have just basic it's a superset of JSON, so you've got all JSON terms, plus you've got these like Kriti terms which are sort of quoted in double curly brackets, and they are, you can do path lookups on objects and arrays. You can loop over arrays. You can do conditional statements, if then else, with some predicate operations, and there's a few more than that now. There's string interpolation, and there's string interpolation, and like this is sort of like what's currently available, but and there's I guess it's not on here, but there's also there's a function for escaping strings for doing URL templating. But I can find the pull request for that to show you in a second. But what we've been working on is a few features to help with webhook transforms. Specifically, this is something from JavaScript, optionals, or JavaScript style optional chaining, which, so like normally when you're doing a path lookup in Kriti, if an object is, if you're doing a lookup on some field in an object and the field doesn't exist, it's going to throw an exception. In JavaScript, you get an undefined. In Kriti, we don't have undefined as a first class value, so we just throw an exception. And that's fine if you have like a really solid understanding of, if you have a solid guarantee about the schema from your API. But oftentimes with the web, that's not necessarily the case, and you can have different, there's optional terms that can come in in your schema, and there's various reasons why the shape might not be precise. So with this optional chaining feature, which just looks just like the optional chaining in JavaScript, wherever you use it, if the field, in this case bar, is not bound, if it's undefined, then rather than throwing an exception, we just short circuit the entire path lookup and return a null value. So it doesn't matter what is past that point, and it won't throw an exception at that point. It'll just give you a null. So that way, then you can use that with in a kind of a verbose way with an if statement to have like a basic defaulting behavior for if a field is missing. There's an example of that right here, where bar is undefined. If bar is undefined, then we'll just default to null and perform the conditional statement without throwing an exception. So this is there's a pull request for this feature right now. It's not been merged yet, but that should be coming in pretty soon. And then another upcoming feature that we're talking about and working out the details on to sort of go with this is also kind of borrowed from JavaScript. That is, I mean, in JavaScript they call it the nullish operator, but that the semantics of that operator are really specific to JavaScript and how it handles undefined versus null. But so really, I mean, I should rename this document, because really what's going on here is it's a sort of defaulting operator. So if you use this operator on a null value, it yields you the value to the right. And if you use this value on a non-null value, then you just get that value back. So what this means is that you know, with the optional chaining, that means you can do a path lookup, and then if the field is undefined in your object, then you can have a default value other than null. And it's associative, so you can chain these things along, and there's other little tricks you can play with it. But between the two of them, that'll allow you to do things like check if a certain session variable is in scope, and then if so, put it in your query parameters. Otherwise, put something else in your query parameters, or don't put anything in the query parameters, or whatever it is. So we think like this is going to be like a pretty useful tool. I mean, or the combination of these two is going to be pretty useful. And other than that, there's been some work on sort of improving error reporting, and so which should make its way downstream into the user interface of webhook transforms in terms of like more clear errors and explanations of what's gone wrong. And I think those are the main large new features. We added a bunch of like more predicate operations, like so now you can check like object and array membership using kind of like a Pythonish syntax, I guess, and just some more, you know, just some basic predicate operations that you would expect to have in any programming language. And we're also sort of we're thinking about the syntax a little bit, and this is sort of nothing set in stone yet, but the one nice property that we like almost adhere to but don't quite adhere to is that any Kriti term is always quoted in these like double curly brackets. So you can always clearly distinguish between what is like actual JSON and what is an extension of JSON that will then evaluate into JSON. And the only exception is the loop in the if statements. So we use the double curly brackets in a kind of different way here, because you see the whole term isn't quoted in them. Instead, it's like you've got a declaration, a beginning and an ending declaration using them in both cases. And so we're thinking about if it's maybe worth sort of improving the symmetry of the syntax to sort of like, and how that might like improve clarity of understanding these templates, and also like how that would affect like implementation details. But this is all kind of anything like that, any breaking change like that would be like really well defined before it would go through. And we're like my only point of bringing this up is that we're still kind of working out some of the finer details with this language, but it's pretty much the basic operations and the principles of it being like a really simple, easy to use expression language that is embedded in Hasura. That's kind of the core idea here, and we're just trying to find the best way to make that happen at the moment. But also we're like highly open to feedback from users. We would love to get any sort of comments on what you like or what you don't like about either the features that it has, or the syntax, or features that you wish it had. Anything like that would be really helpful, because you know, this is for you guys. So yeah, thanks. That's